Hello, fellow gardeners. Today we're hanging out in the kitchen. We're going to talk about different ways to preserve tomatoes. We're going to turn them into culinary gold, the kind of stuff that'll have you savoring summer all year round. Let's dive in. First up, a classic roasted tomato sauce. Crank the oven up to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Use plump, juicy tomatoes, wash, remove cores, and cut them in half. Toss them on a baking sheet with olive oil, salt, and pepper. Roast for 45 minutes. Once cooled, blend in a food processor or a Vitamix or whatever you have until smooth. Store in the fridge in an airtight container for up to a week or freezer for a longer storage time. This sauce is perfect for pasta, pizza, or dipping. Next up, we're making sun-dried tomatoes. Start by selecting ripe, juicy tomatoes. Remove the cores and slice them in half lengthwise, ensuring each piece is even for consistent drying. Lay the halved tomatoes on a raised screen or a baking sheet. Make sure they are spaced out evenly to allow air to circulate around each piece. This helps in the drying process. Sprinkle the tomatoes lightly with salt. The salt not only adds flavor but also helps to draw out moisture, speeding up the drying process. Place them out in the hot sun, preferably in a spot that gets direct sunlight for most of the day. Depending on the intensity of the sun and the humidity levels, it could take anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks for the tomatoes to dry completely. You may want to place a fan over your tomatoes. Blowing a fan on the tomatoes while they're drying can help to speed up the process and keep bugs away. Check them daily to monitor their progress. Also, it's important to bring the tomatoes inside at night to protect them from moisture. You can place them back out in the sun the next day. Once the tomatoes are fully dried, they should have a leathery texture and be slightly sticky to the touch. At this stage, they are ready to be stored. You can preserve them in olive oil, which adds a rich flavor and keeps them soft. Alternatively, you can store them in an airtight container in the freezer for longer shelf life. Sun-dried tomatoes are a versatile ingredient, perfect for adding a burst of flavor to salads, pastas, and sandwiches. Now it's time to get serious. Let's talk about the art of canning whole or halved tomatoes. This process will ensure you have fresh, delicious tomatoes all year round. First, we need to start with the basics. Select ripe, firm tomatoes for the best results. Wash them thoroughly under running water. Then, remove the cores. Next, we move on to blanching. This step is crucial as it helps to loosen the skins, making them easier to peel. Bring a large pot of water to a boil and prepare an ice bath. Submerge the tomatoes in the boiling water for about 30 to 60 seconds, then transfer them immediately to the ice bath. The skins should slip off effortlessly. While the tomatoes are cooling, let's get our jars and lids ready. Sterilizing them is essential to prevent any bacterial growth. Remember, always follow official safety guidelines. This step ensures that your canned tomatoes will be safe to eat. Now it's time to pack the tomatoes into the sterilized jars. Make sure to leave about an inch of headspace at the top of each jar. This space is necessary for the tomatoes to expand during the canning process. To ensure the acidity level is safe for canning, add a tablespoon of bottled lemon juice or half a teaspoon of citric acid to each jar. This step is crucial for preventing the growth of harmful bacteria. Once the jars are packed and the acidity level is adjusted, seal them with the sterilized lids. Place the jars in a boiling water bath, making sure they are fully submerged. Processing time for the jars is different for everyone, so be sure to check the safety guidelines before you begin. After processing, carefully remove the jars from the water bath and let them cool on a towel or cooling rack. You should hear a popping sound as the jars seal, indicating they are properly sealed. I usually wait 12 to 24 hours before moving my jars. This ensures they have cooled completely. Once they have cooled, label them and store in a cool, dark place. There's nothing like enjoying the taste of homegrown summer tomatoes, even in the depths of winter. Next, let's make a creamy tomato basil soup. Sauté chopped onions, carrots, and celery in olive oil until softened. Add diced tomatoes and tomato paste. Pour in chicken broth, add oregano and fresh basil, and let it simmer. Next, using an immersion blender or regular blender, you may need to do this in batches depending on how big your blender is, and puree the soup until smooth. Return it to the soup pot. Make the roux in a separate pot, add butter and melt on medium heat. Stir in the flour and whisk together constantly for about 10 minutes or until the roux is a nice golden brown color. Add the roux and stir a big ladle full of soup into the roux. It will start to form a thick paste. Slowly add another 2 to 3 cups of warm soup to the roux, whisking it until smooth. Add the mixture to the soup pot and stir well to combine. Stir in Parmesan cheese, half and half or milk, and salt and pepper. Add additional oregano and fresh basil as desired. Stir well. Cook for a few more minutes until warmed through. Finish with a swirl of cream and fresh basil. You may also want to make some extra. You can freeze it for later. It's perfect for those nights you're too tired to cook. Ready to ditch store-bought ketchup? Let's make our own. Dice about 6 pounds of tomatoes. Add chopped onions, brown sugar, and apple cider vinegar. Add ground mustard, allspice, and cayenne pepper. Bring to a boil, then simmer for 2 to 3 hours until thickened. Blend until smooth and glossy, let it cool, then transfer to airtight containers or jars and store in the refrigerator. Freezing whole tomatoes is a brilliant way to preserve their flavor. Rinse and pat dry tomatoes. Remove the cores. Spread on a baking sheet and freeze for a couple of hours. Transfer to freezer bags or containers. Label with the date. These can now be added to whatever recipes you decide. They will stay tasty for around 6 months or so. Next, we're making tomato powder. Rinse core and slice tomatoes paper thin. Arrange on baking sheets or use a dehydrator. Dry at 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 to 12 hours. You can also use a freeze dryer if you have one. Blitz dried slices into a fine powder. Store in an airtight container or mylar bag for longer storage. Let's spice things up with homemade canned salsa. Combine chopped tomatoes, onions, and jalapenos with olive oil, salt, and pepper. Add cilantro, garlic, lime juice, and cumin. Blend veggies with other ingredients to desired consistency. Bring to a boil, then reduce to a gentle bubble. Simmer for 2 to 3 hours, stirring frequently. Allow the salsa to cool, then transfer to jars or other airtight containers for storage in the fridge or freezer. Dive into fermentation with lacto-fermented salsa. Dice tomatoes, onions, peppers, garlic, and cilantro. Add lemon and lime juice, sea salt, and spices to taste. Create a brine with sea salt and filtered water. Pack veggies into a jar, leaving an inch of space. Pour in the brine, ensuring veggies are submerged. Cover with a breathable cloth and secure with a rubber band. Ferment in a cool, dark spot for 2 to 3 days. Transfer to the fridge. Spread some sunshine with sweet and savory tomato jam. Roughly chop tomatoes. Add chopped onions, brown sugar, and balsamic vinegar. Add ground ginger and cloves. Simmer for 2 to 3 hours or until thickened, stirring frequently. Allow the jam to cool, then transfer to jars or other airtight containers for storage in the fridge or freezer. Don't waste those unripe green tomatoes. Instead of letting them go to waste, let's pickle them and enjoy their tangy flavor all year round. Pickling is a great way to preserve the freshness and add a burst of flavor to your meals. Start by slicing the green tomatoes into thin, even rounds or cut into small cubes if you prefer. This ensures that they absorb the brine evenly and get that perfect pickled texture. Make sure to use a sharp knife for clean cuts. Next, toss the tomato slices with coarse salt. This step is crucial as it helps to draw out excess moisture from the tomatoes, making them firmer and more receptive to the pickling brine. Let them sit for 24 hours, allowing the salt to work its magic. Now let's make the brine. Combine vinegar, water, and sugar in a saucepan. The vinegar adds the necessary acidity, while the sugar balances the flavors. Bring this mixture to a boil, ensuring that the sugar is fully dissolved. Once the brine is ready and the tomatoes have been salted for 24 hours, pour the hot brine over the tomatoes. The heat helps to further soften the tomatoes and infuse them with the brine's flavors. Let them soak in this mixture for another 24 hours. Now it's time to pack the tomatoes into sterilized jars. Add your choice of spices to enhance the flavor. Garlic, peppercorns, and dill are classic choices, but feel free to experiment with other herbs and spices like mustard seeds, coriander, or even a touch of chili for some heat. Finally, seal the jars tightly and store them in the refrigerator for at least 24 hours before eating. This allows the flavors to meld and develop over time. Be patient, as the pickled green tomatoes will be at their best after about a month. Enjoy them as a tangy snack, a side dish, or a unique addition to your favorite recipes. Canned crushed tomatoes are a pantry staple. Wash and core tomatoes. Cut an X in the bottom of each tomato. Blanch to loosen skins in boiling water for 30 to 60 seconds or until skins split, then dip in cold water. Slip off skins and crush tomatoes by hand. You can leave them whole or cut them in halves if you like. Sterilize jars and lids. Fill jars with crushed tomatoes, leaving an inch of space. Add a tablespoon of lemon juice to each jar. Process in a boiling water bath using official guidelines. I love homemade crushed tomatoes. This is one of my favorite ways to preserve my harvest. Tomato paste is a flavor powerhouse. Wash and core tomatoes. Cut an X in the bottom of each tomato. Blanch to loosen skins in boiling water for 30 to 60 seconds or until skins split, then dip in cold water. Slip off skins and cut tomatoes into chunks. Simmer in a large pot over low heat for a couple of hours. Reduce by half to a thick, paste-like consistency. Pass through a food mill or blend in a high-power blender. Store in sterilized jars using your preferred canning method or use freezer-safe containers. Talking about these preserving methods has me excited to get in the kitchen. How about you? Remember, always follow proper safety guidelines when preserving food. Enjoy your tomato preserving adventure.